You ever notice how the most important things in life don't grow in ways you can see right away? Think about it. When a seed is planted, there's nothing happening above ground at first. You don't see the roots forming. You don't see the soil shifting. To the naked eye, it looks like nothing is happening. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean nothing is taking place. The truth is, the most critical work is happening where nobody can see it, in places that are hidden, in stages that are silent. That's why so many people quit too soon, because they confuse invisibility with inactivity. And I came to remind you tonight, you're closer than you think. Some of you have been praying, showing up, doing the work, staying faithful, and wondering, why am I not seeing results yet? You're tempted to think that silence means God forgot, or that lack of visible progress means nothing is moving forward. But can I tell you something? There's a difference between nothing happening and not seeing what's happening. Those are not the same thing. Invisible progress is still progress. It's just hidden for now. I know what it feels like to want proof that things are moving. You want to look at your life and say, yeah, I can see it. I can measure it. I can post it. I can point to it, but often the season before your breakthrough is the season that feels the most uneventful. And if you don't understand that, you'll walk away from something that's actually about to bloom. What you think is a dead end might just be the dirt covering your seed. Let me paint this for you. Imagine someone at the gym. They're showing up every day, sweating, putting in the work. Week 1, no change. Week 2, nothing. Week 3, maybe a little soreness, but still the mirror looks the same. And then around week 4, something starts to shift. Muscles tighten. Endurance builds, strength increases. But here's the key. All that progress didn't start at week 4. It was happening on week 1, week 2, and week 3. You just couldn't see it yet. Progress is invisible until it isn't. And I think for some of us, that's where we are. You're in the weeks of your life where you're putting in the work, but you haven't seen the mirror change yet. You've been praying, but the situation looks the same. You've been sowing, but you haven't seen the harvest. Can I encourage you? Don't misinterpret the hidden stage as wasted time. Just because you can't see the fruit doesn't mean the root isn't growing deeper. Sometimes the most important growth is the kind that nobody applauds because nobody can see it yet. That's why the Bible says, don't grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you don't give up. Proper time. Not your time. Not their time. Proper time. Which means the harvest has already been scheduled. You just can't see the calendar. The question isn't whether something is happening. It's whether you're willing to keep showing up while it's hidden. I think of it like this. There are seasons where God does his best work behind the scenes. It's kind of like backstage at a play. You don't see the set being built. You don't see the props being moved. You don't see the stagehands preparing. All you see is the curtain, and from your seat, it looks like nothing is happening. But behind that curtain, everything is being arranged for the next act. And when the curtain finally lifts, you realize all that unseen work was necessary for what you were about to experience. So don't despise the season where nothing looks different. Don't let impatience convince you that you're stuck. You might be closer than you think. What you see as delay may actually be preparation. What you call silence may actually be strategy. God doesn't need to prove progress to validate the process. He just needs you to trust that something is happening beneath the surface. And here's what's amazing. When the breakthrough does show up, it often happens suddenly. It's like when a bamboo tree is planted. For years, nothing visible happens. You water it, nurture it, protect it, but for years, nothing breaks the soil. Then in one season, it shoots up feet in just weeks. Did it really grow overnight? No, it was growing the whole time underground, establishing roots, preparing to sustain the height it was destined to reach. And that's you. You've been establishing roots in the unseen. And when it's time, what has been invisible is going to become undeniable. So if you've been wondering, why am I not there yet? Why does it feel like nothing's changing? Don't walk away. Don't stop. Don't quit watering your seed. The evidence may be invisible now, but the fruit is inevitable later. And when it finally happens, you'll realize the hardest part of the journey wasn't wasted at all. It was necessary. One of the greatest lies we believe when we're in the middle of a struggle is that setbacks mean we've done something wrong or that somehow we've missed our opportunity. But what if I told you that setbacks are not signs of failure? They're actually proof that you're moving forward. You don't face resistance when you're standing still. You only face resistance when you're gaining ground. Think about it. If you were going in the wrong direction, the enemy wouldn't need to stop you. If you were off track, there wouldn't be pressure against you. The very fact that you're facing resistance is evidence that you're on the right path. That's why sometimes the hardest seasons come right after you make a decision to step into something new, something bold, something God-breathed. It's like the opposition shows up as confirmation that you're moving in the right direction. I want you to picture a bow and arrow. When the archer pulls the bowstring back, it looks like the arrow is being dragged in the wrong direction. It looks like it's moving backwards. But that setback, that pullback, is what gives it the power to fly forward. Without the tension, there's no release. Without the pullback, there's no launch. Some of the things you're calling a setback right now might actually be the setup God is using to propel you farther than you ever thought you could go. And I know it doesn't feel like that when you're in it. When the door closes, when the plan falls apart, when the opportunity you thought was yours slips through your fingers, it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like punishment. But often what feels like rejection is actually redirection. What feels like loss is making room for something greater. Sometimes God lets the door close, not because He's finished with you, but because He's protecting you from settling for less than what He has prepared. Can I be real with you? Some of the most significant seasons of growth in my life didn't come when everything was going my way. They came in the times when I felt like I was going backward, when I was wrestling with disappointment, when I was praying for God to open a door, and instead He shut it in my face. And yet, looking back, I can see now that those very moments were the turning points. Those were the seasons that grew me, stretched me, and prepared me. What I thought was failure was actually formation. And it's not just personal. You see it everywhere in life. When an athlete trains, they don't get stronger without resistance. The weights they push against, the strain they feel, that's the very thing that builds their strength. If you remove the resistance, you remove the growth. It's the same in your life. The pushback, the obstacles, the setbacks, they're not signs you're weak. They're the very things that make you strong enough to carry what's ahead. But here's where we mess it up. We want the progress without the process. We want the victory without the battle. We want the promise without the struggle. And when the struggle shows up, we assume something's wrong. But what if the struggle is the signal? What if the resistance is the receipt that you're right where you're supposed to be? I think of it like turbulence on a plane. Nobody likes it. Nobody asks for it. But you know when the turbulence starts? Not when the plane is parked on the ground, not when it's taxiing down the runway. It only happens once you're in the air. The turbulence is not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're flying. And I came to tell somebody tonight, the very turbulence you're experiencing is proof that you've taken off. So don't misinterpret your setbacks. Don't label the tension as defeat. That thing that looks like it's holding you back might be the very thing that's pulling you into position. Sometimes God lets you face resistance not to stop you, but to strengthen you. And sometimes the very setback you're cursing today is the testimony you'll be sharing tomorrow. Because if you think about it, every story worth telling has setbacks. The hero doesn't just walk a straight line to victory. There's always a struggle. There's always a fall. There's always that moment where it looks like they're done for, and then comes the turnaround. Why would your story be any different? Maybe the reason your setback feels so heavy is because your comeback is going to be that much greater. So the next time you hit a wall, the next time you face a delay, the next time something doesn't go the way you thought it would, don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't believe the lie that this is the end. Setbacks don't mean you're done. They don't mean you're off course. They're the evidence that you're in motion. One of the traps we fall into is believing that progress only counts if it's dramatic. We think it has to be a giant leap, a visible breakthrough, a headline moment. And if it's not that, we dismiss it as insignificant. But the truth is, it's not the giant leaps that get you where you're going. It's the small, consistent steps that nobody celebrates, nobody sees, nobody boasts about. Those are the ones that stack up and eventually create what looks like an overnight success. Every big moment you admire in someone else's life is built on 1,000 small, ordinary steps that nobody noticed. The marriage that looks strong, it wasn't made in one big decision. It was built in daily choices to forgive, to listen, to show up. The person with deep faith, they didn't get it in a single prayer. It came from countless quiet moments of trust when nobody else was watching. The business that looks like it's thriving, it wasn't launched by one bold risk. It was sustained by 1,000 little sacrifices, 1,000 hidden hours of hard work. But we miss this because we're always looking for the leap. We want the dramatic moment. We want to skip the daily grind and go straight to the highlight reel. And when we don't see instant results, we assume it's not working. But can I tell you, it's working. Every small step is a seed. Every decision to keep going when it would have been easier to quit is another brick in the foundation. You may not see the wall yet, but you're laying stones one by one, and sooner or later it will stand tall. Let me give you a picture. If you climb a staircase, each step doesn't look like much. Each one feels small, almost insignificant compared to the entire staircase. But take enough of those steps, and suddenly you're standing in a place you never thought you'd reach. What got you there wasn't one giant leap. It was a sequence of small steps that added up. Life works the same way. Breakthroughs aren't built in an instant. They're built in inches. That's why the Bible says not to despise the day of small beginnings. Because small beginnings are still beginnings. Small steps are still steps. And sometimes the reason you haven't seen your leap yet is because you're still in the stacking stage. You're stacking faith, you're stacking discipline, you're stacking obedience. And while it may not look impressive right now, give it time. Because small steps, when you stay consistent, will always produce big leaps. Think about how water boils. At 211 degrees, it's hot water. Just one more degree, at 212, and it boils. That one extra degree makes the difference between water and steam. But here's the thing. You don't get to 212 without passing through 180, 190, 210. Every degree matters. Every step counts. Without the smaller increments, you never reach the boiling point. Some of you are closer than you realize. You're at 210, 211. And if you keep stepping, if you keep adding, the breakthrough is about to show up. The danger is we underestimate consistency. We think it's just one prayer. It's just one workout. It's just one act of kindness. Does it really matter? Yes, it matters. Because the small things you're doing are shaping the person you're becoming. They're training your character, building your strength, aligning your steps with where you're called to go. The enemy would love for you to despise the small things because if he can get you to despise them, he can get you to abandon them. And if you abandon them, you'll never reach the leap. I wonder how many breakthroughs we've missed, not because God didn't want to give them, but because we stopped stacking the steps that would get us there. We got discouraged when the steps felt too small, when the progress felt too slow, when nobody noticed. But hear me, what feels small today will look monumental tomorrow. You don't get the leap without the steps. And sometimes the leap doesn't even feel like a leap when it happens. Because by the time you get there, you've been stacking so long that what looked impossible before now feels natural. That's the beauty of steady, consistent progress. It transforms what once looked like a miracle into something you're now equipped to handle. So if you feel like your steps are too small, like your progress isn't fast enough, like your obedience doesn't matter, don't believe that lie. Keep stacking. Keep stepping. Keep sowing. Because the leap you're praying for is already being built in the small steps you're taking right now. Have you ever noticed that the hardest part of the journey usually comes right before the breakthrough? It's almost like the pressure intensifies, the weight gets heavier. The darkness feels thicker right before the light breaks through. And if you don't know that, you'll give up in the very moment you were the closest to what you've been praying for. The struggle is not the end. The struggle is often the sign that you're standing on the edge of something new. I've seen it over and over again. People pressing, believing, pushing forward. And just when they're about to see what they've been working toward, the opposition ramps up. The temptation grows stronger. The disappointment feels deeper. The fight feels harder. And the enemy whispers that this is proof you're not going to make it. But what if it's proof that you're closer than ever? What if the reason the struggle is so intense is because the enemy knows you're one step away from stepping into your breakthrough? Think about it. When a woman gives birth, the pain is greatest right before the delivery. That's when the contractions are the strongest. That's when the pressure feels unbearable. But that pain is not the sign of death. It's the sign that life is about to come forth. What feels like breaking you down may actually be the thing bringing something new out of you. The struggle is not evidence that God has abandoned you. It's evidence that something is about to be born through you. And that's why the seasons where you want to quit are so dangerous. Because those are often the seasons when you're the closest. The enemy knows he can't take away your destiny. So what does he do? He tries to wear you down until you walk away from it yourself. He tries to convince you that the pain is permanent, that the pressure is pointless, that the struggle is stronger than the promise. But the truth is, pressure is a part of progress. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Breakthrough struggle. I remember reading about how a chick breaks out of an egg. From the outside, it looks cruel to watch it struggle. You see it pecking, fighting, pushing against the shell. And you want to help. You want to break the shell for it. But if you do, you actually weaken it. Because the very process of struggling to break through is what gives it the strength to survive outside. If the chick doesn't struggle, it doesn't grow strong enough to live. Some of the struggles you're in right now aren't meant to destroy you. They're meant to develop you. And I know it doesn't feel like that when you're in the middle of it. When you've been praying for years and the answer hasn't come. When you've been faithful, but the breakthrough hasn't shown up. When it feels like every door is still closed, every opportunity still out of reach. You start asking, why is this so hard? Why hasn't it happened yet? But maybe the hardness of the moment is the very proof that you're on the edge of something about to shift. See, the enemy doesn't fight people who aren't a threat. If you weren't close to something, he wouldn't bother resisting you. The very fact that you're feeling this pressure is confirmation that there's something worth fighting for on the other side. And if you can hold on in this moment, if you can stay faithful in this struggle, if you can push just a little bit longer, you'll see that the very place you thought you couldn't survive is the place you're going to testify from. And here's the beautiful thing. When the breakthrough comes, it doesn't just relieve the pain, it redeems the pain. You look back and realize the struggle wasn't wasted. The tears you cried weren't wasted. The nights you spent wondering weren't wasted. All of it was preparing you, stretching you, strengthening you, positioning you. Without the struggle, you wouldn't even be ready to carry the blessing. So maybe the struggle you're in right now isn't a sign to stop. It's a sign to keep going. Maybe the pressure you feel isn't proof you're losing. It's proof you're close. What if the very thing that feels like it's breaking you is actually birthing something in you? And what if you quit now, not knowing that your breakthrough was waiting just one step further? Don't quit in the struggle. Don't let the weight of this moment convince you that you're not going to make it. Don't surrender your promise because the pressure feels unbearable. Because history has proven it again and again. Some of the greatest breakthroughs happen right after the greatest struggle. One of the hardest things to do in life is believe in the gap. That space between where you are and where you thought you'd be. Between the promise and the fulfillment. Between the vision God gave you and the reality you're living in. That gap can feel endless sometimes. It can feel like you're always reaching but never arriving. Always hoping but never seeing. And if you're not careful, the gap will convince you that you're stuck. But the truth is, the gap is closing. It may not close all at once, but it is closing step by step, moment by moment, day by day. The reason it's so hard to believe that is because we measure the gap by how far we still have to go, not by how far we've already come. We wake up and look at what's missing, what hasn't happened yet, what's still out of reach. And we forget to look back at the steps we've already taken, the mountains we've already climbed, the obstacles we've already overcome. You've survived things you didn't think you could. You've walked through seasons you thought would break you. And yet here you are. That's proof that the gap is closing. But believing in the gap closing is more than just looking back. It's looking forward with trust. It's deciding even when the evidence isn't there, even when the timing doesn't make sense, even when nothing looks different, that you still believe God is working. That you still believe he who began a good work in you will carry it to completion. That you still believe your story isn't over. Because the gap isn't permanent. The gap is just the space where God does some of his best work. And here's the thing, most of the time, the gap doesn't close in one dramatic moment. It closes through small, almost invisible shifts. The gap between insecurity and confidence closes when you speak up one more time, even if your voice shakes. The gap between debt and freedom closes when you make one wise decision with your money, even if it feels small. The gap between brokenness and healing closes every time you forgive, every time you show up, every time you let God work in places nobody else can see. That's why you can't despise the process. Because the process is the proof the gap is closing. You may not be where you want to be yet, but you're not where you were. And the same God who brought you this far isn't about to leave you stranded in the middle. But believing in the gap closing requires more than patience. It requires vision. You have to see beyond what is to what can be. You have to let fate paint the picture that your eyes can't see yet. Because sometimes the gap looks so wide that if you only go by what you see, you'll lose hope. But if you let God give you his perspective, you'll realize the gap isn't as wide as it looks. What seems impossible from your point of view looks inevitable from his. And I want you to hear this. Your gap doesn't disqualify you. It doesn't mean you're behind. It doesn't mean you failed. Everyone has a gap. Everyone has a space between their reality and their expectation. The difference is some people stop believing in the gap closing. And some people keep walking by faith until they see it happen. Think about the Israelites. God promised them the land, but there was a gap between Egypt and Canaan. That gap was the wilderness. And in the wilderness, they complained, they doubted, they lost faith. Some of them even wanted to go back to Egypt because the gap felt too long. But the ones who kept believing, the ones who kept walking, they were the ones who entered the promise. The wilderness wasn't the end. It was just the gap. And if the gap has a beginning, it also has an ending. So I came to tell you, don't stop believing. Don't stop trusting. Don't stop stepping. The gap is closing. Every prayer you've prayed, every tear you've cried, every step you've taken, it's closing the distance between where you are and where God has called you to be. You may not know how, you may not know when, but you can know this day this way forever. And when the gap does close, it won't just be about the destination. It'll be about what God taught you in the space in between. You'll realize the gap wasn't wasted. The gap built your faith. The gap stretched your patience. The gap taught you dependence. The gap shaped you for the very thing you were waiting on. What felt like delay was really development. What felt like distance was actually preparation. So don't lose heart. Don't give up in the middle. Don't let the gap convince you that your story ends here. The gap is closing. The breakthrough is coming. The promise is on its way. So if you've been feeling like nothing is happening, remember progress is invisible until it isn't. If you've been facing resistance, don't mistake it for failure. It's just a sign that you're moving forward. If your steps feel too small, don't despise them. Those steps are stacking into a leap you can't yet see. If the struggle feels unbearable, hold on, because your breakthrough is usually right on the other side of the battle. And if the gap feels too wide, trust that it's closing, piece by piece, moment by moment, because the God who started the work in you is faithful to finish it.